So we asked every child and adult we interviewed, do you think it's a good thing that there's so much focus on childhood obesity? Because when you're obese yourself, do you want to hear everyone talking about it? Does it give other kids the words to use against you, you know? And we found that all of them really did think it was a positive thing. They didn't feel so alone. They felt that, you know, it's brought a lot of interest to the subject and there were going to be a lot of changes. Don't you think, Ginger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, NIH, this is a huge part of their budget. You know, this is gaining attention on the national level, so all those things are good.
Yeah,
but
there's some momentum.
Yeah, there just needs to be a greater sense of urgency.
I think urgency, and also at the ground level, at the very basic level, what does this mean? So, for example, we would meet the teen and he was told to look at the calorie counts, but he doesn't know what a calorie is. So if you don't own a pedometer or haven't gone on a treadmill, like, how do you know? So, and I thought to myself, yeah, I wouldn't know if I hadn't stepped on a treadmill. Like, oh, you can eat that piece of chocolate cake, you have to run for 2 hours. You know, I think I would have thought, 15 minutes.
Right.
So you know, there's a total disconnect between what their understanding of diet and exercise and what the reality is. The stats in DC are 43% of our children are obese or overweight. And that's a huge percentage of the population. And we started, you know, whenever we've worked on stories, I found that, you know, what the general story is and what is accepted is sometimes very different from what's happening on the ground level. And so I thought this would be layered enough that, you know, we would find some really interesting stuff. With some of the little kids you heard, I mean, they were not quite sure why I was there. It was just an interesting stranger and she had a cool mic and, you know, they were excited about that. And I would obviously move my questions so that, for example, I would talk to them, ask them a few questions about maybe being teased in school, and then we jump to something which, you know, wasn't hurtful. And then we had something, you know, something about school and what do they like doing in school, what are they good at. So you kind of jump around so it isn't just, oh, I want to talk to you about your weight, because I never wanted any of them to think, oh, here's one more person talking to me about my weight. And that does not define them, and I didn't want that to define them. So yeah, a lot of the time they just thought it was cool that I had a mic and they would bring their toys or their, you know, they got really comfortable around us.
Yeah. Kavitha said, just pretend like you're on American Idol, and this is the mic you're singing into. On this, we feel like the research is way far behind where it needs to be. You know, we hear all these policy initiatives and initiatives at schools, but one of the obesity clinics we visited, they, until recently, had a 3-year wait list. So kids who really need help aren't getting it.
And one of the children we interviewed, they were putting on, a 7-year-old, is putting on 4 pounds a month. So multiply that by 3 years. You know, can you imagine how much bigger? And yet we hear prevention is always better than cure. So these are really kids at risk who just are not getting the resources and the help that they need.
Meeting Kenny and Willie, who are 2 kids that we sat in on a doctor's appointment with them, and just hearing the problems they were having that were adult problems. And the line I always remember is the doctor saying, we're going to have to reschedule an appointment with your cardiologist. And this is a 7-year-old kid, and I just couldn't believe that. Unbelievable.
I think what was most surprising to me was, you know, going into it, everyone had talked about how no one would want to talk about this, and like there was this huge shame associated with these families, and yet everyone we spoke to wanted to use their real name. And I had given everyone the option of maybe using their middle name, and they said, no, I mean, why would we want to change our names? And I thought that was really good and really kind of different from what we were expecting. At first, I think we didn't realize how important the family is and how changes have to be family-wide.
Yep.
So I thought, oh, the parents could just talk about their child. But when I heard that people were blaming the mother in particular of the parents, I thought, you know, that's all the more reason to kind of get her point of view and see what's going on. Because all of us know that overweight and obese children are teased, but I had never considered that the mother felt that people were judging her all the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why people were so open.
One of the researchers we talked to said only about 100 people in the world can't change their weight through diet and exercise. And that was really surprising.
Yeah, no more excuses.
Yeah. I was surprised by, Kavitha visited a family with a young child, 6-year-old, and they had gotten a lot of help already. They were implementing a lot of changes in their lifestyle, and I was surprised how much that affected the whole family and not just the kid.
And then I think one of the psychologists said to us, that the family, like she encourages the family to make changes because only then people realize what they're asking their little kids to do, because I think a lot of times kids are smaller and they're so cute that we kind of feel like, oh, it's easy for them. And I heard that often, oh, it's easy, they're just little children. It's not. It's incredibly hard. In fact, sometimes it's even harder because they cannot process why everyone else can eat that piece of chocolate cake and they can't. And so, to try and explain that to a little child is really hard. So I thought that was really interesting. There was one, remember we interviewed that researcher, Ginger, and she said when kids cry, a lot of parents give in because it's easier. And she said one of the things she tells them is, if your child cried for a glass of beer, would you give them beer? And the parents say no. And she said, then why would you give them this? And I always thought, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I went to buy granola at the store the other day and looked at all of the sugar content. And Dr. Hancock, one of the doctors we interviewed, said that every 5 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon. And so the least sugar I found was 6 grams. So that's 1 teaspoon of sugar in a half cup serving size, which is very small. And then the largest, I think there were 19 grams of sugar. And I made my decision based on that.
I think of the two of us, like, I eat the worst. I mean, I would eat Lunchables when we first met, and Ginger would show up with an apple, and I'd be like, how can you eat an apple? Like, that's not going to fill you up. We've got 3 hours of interviews, and I'd be like, watch McDonald's pass by and say, hey, what if we just stop here? And I think that really changed through the course of this. I think... I still point it out. I don't kind of insist on stopping. But I definitely think that I've started trying to snack more on fruits and vegetables. I mean, I think that's the one thing that I got from that doctor's visit, that, it's baby steps. It's never going to be this huge change, you flip a switch and your life is changed. I kind of wish it was like that. It's just these baby steps. So I figure... in the next 10 years, I'll get there.